All right, income hackers, I've got a special gift for you today. You are going to be listening to Daniel Godbout, who's going to be talking about how you can balance a full-time job while adding new properties and investing out of state. Not to mention, he's going to talk about a little software that's going to help make it easier for you. Welcome, income hackers. This is your host, Ryan G. Wright. This podcast is for individuals and families who are interested in fast-tracking their financial success. You'll hear experts discussing topics like generating a residual cash flow, building wealth through real estate, financial literacy, creating a family legacy, and overcoming your fears. If you get value out of this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. Let me tell you a little bit about Daniel, and then we'll welcome him onto the show here. Daniel is the CEO and co-founder of Folio Lens. He is also the senior director of IT at Sony PlayStation. You might have heard of that once or twice before. He hiked Kilimanjaro and launched a startup and added 20 doors while working full time. So if you think you can't do it, you should ask this guy, because he is doing it. Before he founded Folio Lens, he served as a senior technology executive, leading cloud infrastructure teams, engineering, architecture, and global operations for over 17 years, including a Fortune 100 company, multiple startups, and several diverse industries. He's based in San Diego, California. He brings a wealth of national real estate information and investing firsthand experience, especially property management. Daniel, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, happy to be here, and thanks for the intro. That was awesome.
Yeah, this is great. So there's a whole bunch I want to tear into here, but when did you get started with real estate? Like, when did you get this real estate bug?
Yeah, for me, it started in earnest about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And I was really looking at out-of-state Minnesota. That's where I'm originally from. Ended up kind of going after a couple deals that didn't come through, but I eventually changed gears and fell back to turnkey investing to get started. I got frustrated with just kind of hitting a dead end. I wanted to make sure that I took action and to kind of build from there. And so I did turnkey for a bit, and then before kind of figuring out a strategy to kind of take that to the next level myself.
Love it. Now, for our listeners that may not know, what is turnkey investing?
Yeah, you're essentially you're partnering with another provider who's doing they're finding a distressed property, they're doing the rehab, they're really getting it to retail, but they're doing the vetting for you, so you know what you're getting in terms of you know what the rent's going to be. You're getting a qualified tenant from day one, and really outsourcing as much as you possibly can. Depending on the provider, you get some warranties on the property as well. So it's important to kind of vet the right partner there. I had heard some kind of I don't know, it was a bit taboo, or some negatives on turnkey, and I think it just depends on the provider. I had a good experience, and not to say that they're all that way, but it was an important building block for me. Yeah.
Are you still going after turnkeys, or are you finding the properties yourself these days?
I'm doing it myself these days for a couple of reasons. The markets I started with, I saw those kind of the numbers, especially with the kind of bull market in real estate. They don't work for me anymore, not the way they did in those same markets. And I think there's just been a lot of activity in those areas. I found better cash on cash return, and just kind of a mix of appreciation in Minnesota, where I invest kind of directly. So the answer is no, not today, but I wouldn't be against it, if the right opportunity came up.
That sounds great. Now, with your investing not going through a turnkey, how are you finding these properties? How are you finding contractors? How are you managing repairs being out of state?
Yeah, 100% of that took time to develop a team, and one of the reasons, it just was a struggle initially. I had to meet the right property manager, broker, and really the maintenance team, and that took a lot of time and just trial and error. And how I went through that was through existing relationships, my network, and my property manager and broker, who one and the same, who's a key partner for me, that came through a relative of mine. And just one of those things of mentioning what you're doing in real estate, you might, if you bring up the topic at a gathering, or in casual conversation, it's not necessarily you're looking for somebody else who has a deal or a property, but sometimes like by mentioning those things, it comes back and, someone will mention your name and it comes up in conversation. And that's really what happened. I had a cousin who wasn't in real estate investing, but knew, the right person and introduced me.
That's awesome. And so are you primarily working, what areas are you primarily working right now? Do you have properties in multiple? Are you focused on one? How do you develop a team in multiple states if you're there? Help us with that a little bit.
Yeah, so I have 3 teams, kind of that represents like the beginning part of my investing and where I'm at now. But where I invest today is like really limited to a couple zip codes. It's a very small area in northern Minnesota. I can usually, if I go to an REI meetup, I can guarantee I'm the only one investing in that area. So it's kind of nice that I'm really like competing with the local landlords and owners there for the most part. And it is tough to kind of to get the right relationships there to do that business. So it's not something, you would do a Zillow search and find the right property. Most of what I've been able to purchase in the last year has been through off-market deals.
That's awesome. So primarily you're just in this one state, these one zip codes is really where your focus is right now.
Yeah, for sure. And if I want to diversify in terms of areas, then I would, at this point, I would go through like syndications to get a little bit more reach, because, you don't get, the more teams you have to manage and kind of oversee, there's just more likelihood for problems and trying to keep up with what's happening in that area. So I just found it to be pretty difficult to stay on top of it with everything else I had. So I could get some kind of efficiencies by focusing in one area. And if you want, there's other ways to achieve diversity. Which I think sometimes is a little bit overstated when you're looking at, where you need to place your real estate. You've got other, your 401k and other means of diversifying, but also within real estate, syndications, crowdfunding projects. Those are all kind of options to extend it.
That's awesome. So one of the reasons I do this podcast is for my boys. I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. I think you've thrown out 2 words they may not understand. So will you explain for them, not for any of my listeners, even though they probably wouldn't want to know, but syndications and crowdfunding? Talk to us about both of these. Give us a little education so everybody can understand that.
Yeah. So syndications are really where you have someone who's a GP is kind of the main, and it could be a few people who form the GP, the general partnership, and they're the ones who are responsible for finding the deal, kind of sponsoring it. And most times they're making a little bit of a fee for doing that. They bring on other investors called LPs, limited partners, to be able to fund these much larger projects. So it's pretty common these days. And then crowdfunding is really just another form of that, where you're getting, at least in my understanding, you're kind of extending access to these deals in the very similar form, but typically the legal framework of it allows for you to have like as little as $5,000 invested in much smaller amounts. Typically they're on platforms that there's a lot more these days, but Fundrise and others that you can invest sometimes as little as 1,000, but typically 5,000-10,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great explanation. With the syndications, there's something you've got to be aware of. And I've done several syndication deals. If you are the limited partner, you are limited. So when you put your money there, you don't really have a say after that. Once your money goes in, it's there. The general partners have the say. So it's really important that you have a good comfort level with the people that are general partners. And I'm not saying general partnerships or limited partnerships always go bad, but lots of them go well. I actually have only had one that I've had a bad experience with, but most of the time as a limited partner, it's gone really well. But you've got to be very careful who you're investing with. That's really what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, once you sign up for that syndication, the GP, the general partner, they can do whatever they want in most cases, and you may not like the decisions being made, and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Of course, yeah, there are definitely some some potential landmines and things. You got to do your own due diligence and vet who you're working with, whether it's just like a one-to-one partnership or it's a syndication. Yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, let me jump back then. So you're finding these properties off market. I want to talk about out-of-state investing, and I want to talk about finding properties out of state. So you're finding these off-market properties. Are you calling? Are you doing postcards? Do you have an agent looking for you? How are you finding these? You're in California. You're investing in Minnesota. How are you finding these off-market properties? Well, first off market means it's not listed on the MLS. Let's clarify that for everybody. Not listed on the MLS. How are you finding those?
That's primarily through my broker. And so, it didn't start this way. It took some investing on my part, his part, and we've been able to pull down several deals. And through that, I think, I'm starting to build up that credibility, which is really important in real estate. You can close on deals, that you can kind of find a way to make it, find a way to execute on these deals. And so that's important as a buyer. I have that with the team I'm working with. And I think that kind of built up enough goodwill where I have my broker actually helping out to reach out to very targeted groups of, say, multifamily owners. So that's always an option. Of course, you could send it out yourself and do letters. So in this case, my broker is sending out limited letters on my behalf. And the way we've targeted those is, let's say I buy a fourplex that, adjacent to that, there's 4 or 5 others fourplexes that are exactly the same. We'll reach out to those owners, and they have comms. They know we close. It just makes it kind of local enough that we've seen a pretty good response to those. And we just tested out, and it's worked. So it's at this point, there's more deals than than I can find the capital at times to close on.
That's awesome. And what is your criteria for reaching out? You're looking for fourplexes or greater. What type of margin are you looking for? What type of return? What makes a good deal for you? What would you say you're looking for that makes a good deal?
Yeah, well, I would say, there's a price per door in that area. I'm looking at like cap rates and that's always going to be local. Like, I live in San Diego. The cap rate here is going to be different than Minnesota. Overall, for my investing, I'm looking for a cash on cash return. So I want to see that to be positive. I don't have a specific number, but I want to see that there, and then augment it with the ability to have some forced appreciation. I'm looking for opportunities in the property, or that it's positioned correctly on purchase so that the market will kind of get me that appreciation. So I'm looking for a blend of a few things that give me some upside. I'm a long-term investor, so I'm not looking to exit on these deals typically in a couple of years. And in that area, it's a growing area for me. So that's a macroeconomic piece that I'm looking at to just, I want to see that the deal looks right. And then I want to see that the area that I'm investing in looks right in the medium long term. And in this case, it does.
That's great. That's awesome. So you picked up 20 new doors. How many property acquisitions was that this last year?
That would be, I believe, 5 deals.
Okay. They were all fourplexes or a combination of something?
Yeah, there's a duplex, there's an aplex in there. They're kind of that medium-sized multifamily.
That's great. What are you looking for in these plexes? Why do you like plexes over single-family houses?
I found, especially in that area, that I'm getting, the right tenants. That's always important. I have some markets like, I won't name any specific markets, but where I've kind of tested it. I had a lot of turnover. It just wasn't a great experience with these really small entry-level multifamily. So that's kind of something I had to learn over time. But it has worked out pretty well for me. They're built around the same time. So it's a very specific criteria that I keep going after. And it's because it's just worked. I mean, that's the only reason, honestly. I would go bigger, but that area, I just haven't seen those come out. And I'm getting, more and more comfortable with adding more doors. So maybe the next time we talk, that would be a 20-plex or something else. But really, it's just because that's what's come up on the market recently. I've gotten pretty used to what that template looks like, and we're making money. So I keep doing it.
That's awesome. As far as financing, are you getting some long-term financing? Are you paying mostly cash or a combination? What's kind of your financing strategy?
Yeah, so I do, it's a little bit of a mix of commercial financing and creative financing. So I tend to offer sellers a couple offers. One is like more traditional, but I do use commercial because I maxed out my Fannie Freddie Mac loans. You can
Sure.
only, I think 10 or 20 if you get creative. And so I found a commercial lender who, I'm probably paying a little bit more than I could if I had a conventional, and it's on a 25-year amortization versus a 30-year, which is typical for conventional. So for 70% of the loan, I get that through my commercial side. And then I bring 15%, and then I'm getting 15% from the seller. So a seller carryback is kind of what I'm blending in there. So that's one offer. The second one is typically like a conventional, or I should say a kind of straightforward offer of just like a 70-30 commercial.
Okay, gotcha. I like it. Little creative financing. Do you give that offer in your letters, or is it something you talk about after they respond to a letter?
It's a follow-up. And so it's once we're actually having some negotiations. And one of the offers, typically, if it's just straightforward commercial financing and it's straightforward for the seller, then I make that offer a little bit less than the one that has my preferred financing. So not a huge amount, but enough to make it attractive. So I want to encourage the seller to go for my creative financing option, because for me, I can go buy 2 properties. One of the ways I was able to do 20 doors instead of less. So I accelerated this year because of kind of stretching my capital.
And let's talk again for my boys that are listening. What is seller financing? What does that mean?
Yeah, it just means that the instead of paying the bank, the seller becomes the bank, kind of to put it simply. There, in this case, I'm making part of my payment for the loan to the traditional commercial bank, and then for the 15%, I'm negotiating with the seller. They're setting the terms, they're the bank. I send them a check every month.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you typically having to pay interest, or those zero interest when you're dealing with the seller financing? Where do you start with that, and how do you negotiate those?
Great question. And when I originally started trying to do that, I just asked if the seller would accept seller financing, which I kind of found to be a mistake, at least in my experience. So what I ended up doing, or what I've done in the last year or so, is I set the terms. And I do something that makes it interesting for them, because I want them to accept it. That's my preferred option. And they have, in this market, they have options. So I typically put in an interest rate which is comparable to the commercial lender. And I set like the amortization schedule, the balloon period, all those factors, and I just present it. So I don't wait for them to say, yes, they're interested. I put it in until you put like an offer together and you hand it to the seller. I don't know, there's just a huge difference in kind of talking about it and putting it in a letter in writing and handing it over. So we've had people say no, and then, we drop off the letter, and then sure enough, the next day they accept, or over the weekend, they come back on Monday and they accept the offer.
That's great. What are you typically looking for? Your interest rate is comparable to what you're getting on the commercial.
Yeah.
Are you asking them for 25 years, or are you saying a 30-year AM and we'll pay off in 5 or pay off in 10? Or what type of balloon are you typically putting on that?
I typically put a 10-year balloon.
Okay.
And that's negotiable. And that's partly because I'll kind of reposition these properties, or I have confidence that I would by then. And I think typical for a commercial bank is 5. The one I work with is 10. So I match up kind of all the terms. The amortization and the balloon period is the same. So I don't have to track anything different.
That makes sense. So you're really just going to the seller saying, hey, if you'll hold back 15%, I'm giving you the same as what I'm going to give my commercial lender.
Yeah.
Is basically what you're doing there, and kind of matching those terms.
Yep, exactly.
That's awesome. We talked a little earlier about turnkey. What are some of the horror stories you heard about turnkey? You didn't experience any of them, but what are some of the horror stories you've heard?
Okay. Well, I've heard of kind of early on, and maybe even from just like other podcasts, but where there's kind of these phantom providers who are placing a tenant, and it turns out the tenant was not really a tenant, or maybe the property didn't hold up. There was a massive issue with the renovation that wasn't covered in any kind of warranty. Maybe the property management, just the kind of that aspect of it isn't working out. So, there's issues with communications and stuff, but I haven't seen any of those firsthand. It's just kind of, in general, it just seems like, there's an understanding you're going to lose some of your profit because there's another middleman in the picture. And I think there's truth to that for sure. You're buying the property retail, so you have to accept that you're okay with. I wanted cash flow when I started. That was my number one goal. I wanted to quit the 9 to 5, or at least always have that option. And by making sure I was maxing out cash flow, even if I was exchanging it for appreciation and long-term kind of wealth growing, potential, that was okay to me.
That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about property management. You've got some experience doing this. You're building a tech startup that has to do with some property management. Talk to us about your theology when it comes to property management, and then we'll get into some specifics.
Yeah, well, so I started on this track of starting Folio Lens about a year ago with my brother-in-law, who's also my co-founder. He's the CTO. And for us, we had this very ambitious plan of adding more and more doors, which we've been doing, and I think we could do a lot more on that front. But what we saw was, with the W-2 jobs and all these other things that we wanted to do that we haven't even talked about, but I needed time. Time's like the number one thing I couldn't replace. And even just handling refinancing properties, I did like 6 or 7 at the same time, which is a bad move. Don't do that if you can avoid it. Just the paperwork alone, and like the closing signings and trying to track down appraisers, it was just like a lot. And what I found from the mountain of paperwork that's at my office at home, not this office, but it was just out of control and it was adding too much time. So I tried hiring a VA and other help, but it created this idea that, hey, we could bring a lot of automation and these just some different ideas to property management, and it starts with documentation. So we've started building some technology that helps with that aspect of it, but also we're looking at, that's like kind of the takeoff point. There's a pretty ambitious plan that we put together to automate and simplify some things down the road that just we don't see on the market today. That's kind of the bottom line. We wanted to also be very mobile friendly from day one. So we'll be on all platforms, but as we launch, we're focusing more on mobile because everyone's on the go. And we see that just in terms of statistics, most of the people the traffic we get is like 80% on mobile. And so we want to kind of disrupt this area and really make it, just more advanced than it is today, and ultimately saving time so that, if you're investing in properties, you think passively, even if turnkey, it's not as passive as you think, especially as you start adding doors. So we wanted to tackle that.
So what you alluded a little bit to the refinances, or you think you're going to tap into lenders where they can get documentation? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Well, it was just that. I mean, it's not directly related to lending there. It just kind of, I think, created just this overwhelming, like the insurance documents flooding in, tax statements from both city and county. In some places, like Memphis is one of those places where you get 2 tax statements instead of 1. So it was just this general idea. For us, it's a lot of what we're really trying to leverage that documentation to help with all the data entry that goes into like tracking properties, having it all at your fingertips. So if you are refinancing, you have to provide a lot of documentation. You want to make it easy to kind of provide those sets of documents. But as you get these new closing disclosures, insurance declaration pages, tax statements, there's a lot of stuff in there that you want to have at your fingertips or be able to kind of harness for yourself as an investor. And, we wanted to start doing that. So it could be as simple as like you have a lease renewal coming up and be able to kind of, within the document, we can see the lease date coming out. You don't have to create a reminder for yourself. We'll create that for you just by being able to see it, be able to see that it's, XYZ document, file it for you, and then start to kind of build on those automation processes. But it starts with a lot of that documentation that's kind of unharnessed, at least from what we saw. And we wanted to bring something unique to the table for our launch. And that's one of those core areas. There's a lot of other areas where you can kind of make long-term rentals behave more like short-term rentals in some of the tools for showing properties. And that still hasn't really come around. And we want to see that happen.
That's awesome. Do you also rent collections, ACHs? Is that kind of part of it as well, or?
Yeah, for launch, we have some lightweight processes. I mean, for online rent collection, that's all there, but there's other things we want to go deeper on. We have some basics for maintenance. But the idea is like on your phone, lightweight, the tenant can do their rent payments via ACH. And we'll add some other options on there in the future, like kind of integrating with local cash payments and stuff, because that's something you just can't get away from. But yeah, so some of the basic property management tenants are what we're adding, and then we're kind of putting in this high-tech stuff behind the scenes, and this long-term direction is adding more and more of these integrations and more automation.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's talk. Daniel, what would you say was your very first income hack?
Okay. I mean, really, I don't know if it's an income hack, but it was really coming down to just maximizing my savings rate. I blew my mind with how much I could save by really focusing on it. And it came down to tracking it and just, at first I went like Dave Ramsey on it. And I think that was a good like initial progression. I got into stocks. I had a couple things that did well, but it really, like, the most important thing was keeping my lifestyle kind of inflation down and maximizing savings. So I got up to like 85% savings rates
Wow.
at one point. Yeah, so that was the best. I don't do so well anymore. But it was important because that helped me kind of build a portfolio, and I could kind of see every dollar I was saving, I could kind of reinvest, and then I get another little green person working for me. At night when I'm asleep, more and more dollars are work for me at night.
Yeah, little armies out there fighting to get more.
Yep. Yeah.
So when you say 85%, just for all of our listeners, what you're basically saying is for every dollar you made, 85 cents of that you were able to put into investing or saving, and you were living off 15 cents of the dollar.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of that, I live in San Diego. My salary was, I have a good salary from my W-2 job, but that wasn't always the case. And I think a lot of people can get way up there. For me, I live in the same house. I was driving the same car for many years. Any car I buy, I keep for over 10 years. That's just I'm okay with buying any car as long as I keep it for more than 10 years. That's kind of my thought process on it. So it amortizes better. Solar in the house, all of those things were kind of factors that helped out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I pretty much have the 10-year rule as well with the car. Cars are a waste of money. So you gotta keep it a while.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And I think that's probably unachievable at 85% for most people. But what I think is achievable is living on less than you make and putting a portion of that towards investing. That's like the golden ticket, right? If you can live on less than you make and get your money out working, that's the secret sauce. That's the recipe to success, is doing that year over year over year.
Introducing the Investor's Edge real estate investing software for fix and flip pros. Target the most profitable deals in your area with ease and start capitalizing on opportunities you didn't even know existed. This simple-to-use software will make it easy to find properties for your flip and fix business, so you can focus on what you do best. Call 801-921-8751 after this podcast to get set up on a free trial.
Probably one of the most basic things you can start with is just don't add to the lifestyle kind of creep that happens. I'm always kind of lecturing my brother, and this is one of our recurring topics, but one of those is really just don't add that next big thing. If you can just stop it, you're going to make more money with your job. And there's some natural things that will happen where your income is going to increase. And that's pretty key. It's just keep the same car. I know people who change out their car every year and a half. That's expensive. There is a huge price you pay for that turnover.
Yeah, I like it. It's kind of like, have you ever played the game Cash Flow before, the Robert Kiyosaki board game?
No, I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's great. I play it with my boys, and it's funny. If they end up drawing the doctor card, they're distraught. And if they get the janitor card, they're celebrating, because they realize this whole concept of the higher lifestyle comes with a higher pay. And typically it takes more to get out of the rat race. Whereas if you're living on less, it's easier to get out of the rat race. And that doesn't mean you can't have nice things or want to do things or any of that type of stuff. I think the real fundamental key here is living on less than you make and investing the difference, and being very strategic about that. I think it's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's talk. What about an income hacker mistake? What's something you've done that you're just oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done that?
Well, one of the first properties that I put an offer on and was almost accepted. So almost a full mistake, but I still made the mistake of going forward on it. It just kind of fell through on its own, and I got lucky. But it wouldn't have been a great deal. It was in not the best part of town. I got emotional about the purchase, and that is a danger with real estate. You kind of get a fever, and you start getting attached to deals. Sometimes you don't want to sell the deal you already have when you should sell it. For me, it was I'm looking for the first property, and I just got too attached to it, and I started overlooking various issues. And it probably would have, it wouldn't have ended my investing career, but it would have slowed me down. That was a big one. And then just not realizing that I was overspending and not investing kind of money early on until I kind of got myself into shape there.
I like it.
Yeah, it's kind of simple, but that's I guess that's been it for me.
I think indifference is key when you're investing. It's if it works, great. If it doesn't work, great. It's so easy to get emotional, but if you're indifferent, it's it's got to meet my criterias, and I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy not to do it, because it's when you get emotionally involved is when you start making exceptions. I mean, most the few deals I've had that have been problems, I've always broken my own rules, right? These are my rules, and I broke them. And it's I can't break my own rules. That's really where most of it comes from. So what about an income hacker success? What's been a good success? Maybe it's been a property you've bought or just a mindset change. What would you say has been a income hacker success?
Well, I guess a couple things come to mind, but one was an eightplex, the eightplex I was talking about earlier. I didn't have the capital at the time to put it together, but I did have, like, I spent the time networking. I had the right, connections, and we're able to pull together some funds to be able to buy that property. I ended up kind of leading kind of that partnership and just getting everyone together, but it was just a case of not letting kind of the raw number of what the deal was going to cost stop me, and the timing, and just kind of finding a way to make it happen. And it's so far turned out to be a great purchase, and it'll do well. But I liked just how that one came together, and kind of bringing those factors of like the creative financing and the team and the partnership together to overcome kind of some limits.
Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about how you structured that deal with some of your partners, or how you worked that out, just kind of in a general sense, so people can get an idea of like how to think creatively in financing?
Yeah, I've gotten pretty familiar with like creating LLCs and going through that process. So all these things can kind of trip you up and slow you down if you haven't done it before. So anytime you have an opportunity to kind of learn about those things, or put it into action, it can help. I would say that with a disclaimer of just make sure you know what you're doing to some extent, and you have some support. But when these bigger deals or these important deals come out, it's you need to be able to move quickly, and having that experience, knowing what you're looking at, is like half the battle, because they're not very complicated. It's just you'll get scared, and there'll be some fear of just the uncertainty. But for me, anyways, it's just an LLC partnership. But I wrote up. There's some pieces like an operating agreement and percentages and roles and responsibilities for the deal. In this case, since there's other people putting in their money and they're putting some confidence in me, it's not quite a syndication, but you still need to put down a plan of what like the finances look like, or they're going to look like, and how we're going to get there. So that was like another thing that you need to think about if you're going to partner with people, is kind of map that out so everyone's on the same page. This is how long, or this is how often we're going to do distributions from the properties, because that can be, so you don't want to figure that out later on. Is it every quarter? Is it every year, 6 months? What do we hope to accomplish? Are we going to hold it for 5 years, or are we married all together for the next 20, 30? Those are things to figure out up front. But it's pretty simple to just I put it under contract under my name. That's kind of typical to do to make it happen quickly, but it's subject to, and I basically just reassign it to the LLC when we have that created and we're ready. I make sure that I talk to the banker, the broker, and everyone's on the same page of what we're going to do. And then just understanding what the bank's criteria is. If you are going to do some financing, you have a partnership. That's another kind of key thing to just get in front of. Depending on the percentages and of what everybody owns, they might all have to like guarantee a loan, or those are just these little gotchas that will slow you down. And but otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward deal.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. Is your plan on that one to hold it forever, or is your plan to sell that at some point?
Yeah, that one in particular, we're looking at a 3 to 5 year hold, but we will extend if everyone is on the same page. But if there's any kind of disagreement, we agree to just go ahead and sell it, even if there's one person who's not on board with that, or we buy out that share.
Well, I like it. I like it. Daniel, any advice for income hackers, people that are trying to get started? Any thoughts or some advice you'd have for them?
If you're getting started, the biggest thing is taking some form of action, and it can just be like picking up the phone, talking to an agent, visiting the location where you want to invest. Try not to get caught up on looking at for too long on these macroeconomics of like which is the best area to invest in. I would usually recommend to someone new getting started out that they try to find an area where they have it looks good. There's a lot of good things happening. It might not be the number one in the US for the state or the city, but it's up there. But also you have some kind of competitive advantage for that area. Some people, you go there already, there's a tax advantage. Try to tie those things together. And I usually find that most people have that. Like they're from North Carolina, or they visit there because, for whatever reason, they like fishing or something. And, a lot of people spend too much time looking at the market, and they're looking on Zillow, looking at night. That's not how you find deals. It's not how you put together your teams. It's by like visiting, by meeting people, talking to people. And so it's just taking that action of some form, and you can, take a lot of small actions that don't cost you anything to get started.
Yeah, that's great advice. I really appreciate it. Daniel, if you're starting all over You had your knowledge, you had your family, you had your experience, but you didn't have a lot of money. If you only had $1,000 and you had to start this all over again, what would you do?
I would, I couldn't do it right now very well, but I would probably spend some time doing some wholesaling, trying to find deals, partnering with someone else, and maybe being, I might not be able to offer financing or the capital, but I usually find that, if people are really invested in making it happen, that there's a lot of things that you can offer in terms of, helping to renovate a property or just to get, something going, right?
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about legacy. What do you think is really important for this next generation to know that they're missing out on or they're overlooking?
Well, right now, I feel like with crypto NFTs, there's a lot of hype around it. I think a lot of people make a lot of money, and they already have, which is awesome. But on the flip side, I worry that there's kind of less of a focus on the fundamentals of like what makes a solid investment and what you need to do to make that happen. More focus, and a lot of people think they have these winning strategies, and in some cases, honestly, it's luck, or at least that's my opinion. And some people, that's not the case. They actually have analyzed it. They know what they're doing. But just making sure you know the difference and that you're still kind of learning about investing and the fundamentals of how like businesses work and what needs to happen. Because like what's happening in the market right now, you won't see probably in 20 years in the same way or 10 years. And hopefully, everyone's in it for long-term wealth creation and being able to keep that.
That's great. I really like it. Well, let's jump into our wrap-up questions here. Just kind of some quick fire. What would you say your biggest, like, what's your why? What's your driver? Why are you doing this?
I want to make an impact. I mean, for me, it's about purpose. I'm okay with making that in a variety of ways, but I felt like the best way I could contribute and make a difference and kind of the way we do things was by creating my own company in the property management space. So I want to see that move forward, and I want to see that kind of model change. So that's a big why for me. That's more professionally, but it does tie into like kind of what makes me tick personally. I want to be able to bring my son into investing and startups. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to be able to like kind of create value in one way or another and kind of see it grow, see what like I'm capable of, see what kind of lasting effect I can make.
That's awesome. What would you say your favorite book is?
My favorite book is probably Dune, which is awesome that they created that movie this year, but that's more in the sci-fi space. But yeah, on the real estate side, I'm thinking the Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller.
Yeah. What was your big takeaway from that book?
It was really just the math behind, even when he kind of pulls his son aside for that experiment of like, I think he offers them two scenarios where, it's like one lump sum, or if I give you a penny every day for X amount of days, and like, which do you think would kind of like you come away with more? And it's, I don't know, it's kind of a small little exercise, but it's just compounding interest and the effect of that. But when you look at like how he assembles a real estate portfolio, it's very doable by anybody. And it just spoke to me in that like anything I was reading, I could go and take that and go implement it.
It's great. He also has a really good book called The One Thing. I don't know if you've read that.
That's it. Yes.
I love that. That's a really, really good book. What about your favorite app? What's the app you find yourself using frequently or you really like that people may not know about?
Oh, besides Folio Lens, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can do that.
Probably Slack. It's just pretty key for me in collaborating. One that's new that I liked a lot, I'll just mention that because just to make it a little more interesting, is Loom. And I use Loom to create these little videos to train. I have a VA that has been helping me out with different kind of startup things and other pieces. And every time, and the reason I do that is because kind of like the E-Myth book, it's about kind of working on your business, not being your business, and kind of creating processes out of everything you do. And so I wanted to be able to hand off things, but not just one time, but again and again, and we can make it better each time. So yeah, I create these videos on Loom, and they're all kind of like easy to kind of share out. And there's different use cases, but that was one of them.
That's cool. Loom.
Yeah, I believe
Ooh.
so. I've just started kind of using it recently, but it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I got to check that out. That's a really good one. If you had all day, money wasn't an object, you got 24 hours, no responsibilities, what would you find yourself doing?
Probably be it's just starting another company. If I'm not working on the one I am already, but I enjoy it a lot. There's a lot of hobbies I have I want to spend more time with, but I guess on that note, it makes me think of, if that thing that you want to do next when you retire and you don't have a job, like you need to start doing it now. If you can, like, and the pandemic kind of brought that home for me. It was like I was already stuck at home. I didn't have my commute, and I wasn't doing those things I imagined I would do. And that was like a big kind of epiphany for me, that like you got to start figuring out the hard ways to integrate the things you love about life today, and do it with your W-2. Do it with like whatever, it's hard, but like figuring out, don't wait till like you have absolutely nothing to do. I've heard stories of people who retire and they don't have a job, and their highlight of their day is like getting dressed up to go to the grocery store or something. And that's not what you want ultimately.
Yeah.
I think most people who are listening to your podcast probably are going to do something else for themselves after this. And if it's the gym, if it's reading books or whatever, like do that now.
I love it. Let's just answer this question. For somebody who's got a W-2 job that's saying, hey, it's really hard to invest in real estate with a W-2 job, or I'm struggling with that at this present time, what would you say to somebody like that that's listening right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are cases where there's probably a legitimate reason why that like can't happen right now. But like if it's financial, there's usually Dave Ramsey's a good place to start in terms of maximizing your savings rate. I think eventually you graduate into some other areas that are ideal for like today or investing today. If it's time, yeah, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. I don't know any other like tricks to that one, but nights, weekends, and I've even been like trying to like, if you will, hack like how long it takes me to make my breakfast. I time it like so that like I'm on the go and I want it to be healthy. I'm not looking for like spending the time figuring out what's for breakfast every day. But I was like pulling a Tim Ferriss video, and I was like, okay, this is like it's a great breakfast, and I make my own version of it. But healthy, and I need to kind of factor those things in as well. I want to be healthy, and I want to kind of be efficient with my time. And that was one of those things where I could get that time back, and I don't know, keep learning and find some time. Sometimes one of the issues I find is that maybe it's like family life can be a big blocker for people. It makes sense, and it's probably like the best kind of excuse that you could find, right? It's very broad, and it's hard for people to challenge that. But one way to kind of get through that is to like talk to your spouse and make them a partner in what you're trying to do. I think if you talk to your spouse or your family and try to find an hour, a couple of hours on the weekend or some other time where they can say, hey, we'll help you protect this time. Like that was a big, improvement for me.
That's awesome. What I really, for our income hackers out there, what I really just heard Daniel say is find what's stopping you from moving forward and figure out a way to break through that barrier. That's
right.
really what I just heard is like, hey, don't use an excuse of something as your excuse. Figure out what is preventing it and figure out a plan to make it work. Because I find a lot of people, when they hit the first brick wall, they're just like, you see, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, I knew it wasn't going to work, right? Oh, this investing stuff is just, only certain people, or Daniel must be super rich, or his dad must have given everything to him, or whatever, you know what I mean? But that's simply not the case. The thing that I find with great people that are doing great things is they have a tenacity that when they hit a barrier, they go over it, they go under it, or they go around it, but they figure out what it is and they find another way to make it work. And so there is some sacrifice, and sometimes it's less about sacrifice and more about discipline. It could be whatever, but instead of using that as the final excuse, it's saying, this is a hurdle in my journey. How do I get around it, over it, on top of it, under it, whatever it takes?
Yeah, love it. I'm not going to say anything else because that was perfect.
Okay, so how can people reach you? Like Folio Lens, I know we've got a 3 months for free for our income hackers with that promotion code, but tell us, how can we get to Folio Lens? How can people get in touch with you? How can they follow you? Those types of things, Daniel?
Yeah, I'll keep it simple. You can either email me directly at dan@foliolens.com, or just follow us on Instagram. It's just @FolioLens. I look at all the messages. I'll respond. But yeah, we'd love to have your listeners on. And if there's any kind of feedback as we launch, we're all ears. Like, we're going to tune it to like what people are looking for. We have kind of our thesis and feedback and stuff that we've gathered originally, but it's just going to keep getting better with every release, and we're going to be catering it to the people that we serve.
That's awesome. I mean, it's pretty cool. If you guys jump on with this Folio Lens, you can really help tailor the outcome of this with your input, along with everybody else's, but Daniel's going to listen to you, because he wants to make this, and he's coming from a perspective of doing it himself as well. So it's not like some company that's like, oh, let's go build a property management app. We've never done this before, right? You understand the challenges and said there's a better way to skin this cat, and are looking for people to kind of help out, give you feedback, and you guys want to build a great product around it.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Ryan.
Just so you guys know, if you're dyslexic like me, Folio Lens is FOLIOLENS, just so you know. And is it just foliolens.com for the website?
That's right.
Okay, fantastic. And again, that promotion code is Income Hacker. If you use Income Hacker, all one word, or it's two words, but put together, at sign up Folio Lens app, they'll give you 3 months for free. All right. Any final words? Anything, Daniel, you'd like to leave with us? Anything maybe we missed, or something you want to emphasize, or something you learned from today?
I had a lot of fun, no, I love the time. Thank you, Ryan. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here and showing that perspective of somebody with a W-2 job that's going out there and making some things happen, along with trying to balance everything else in their life. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited about what you're doing, super excited about what you guys are doing with Folio Lens. I can't wait to see that develop and grow over time. Again, for our listeners, go check it out. Income Hacker, you'll get the first 3 months for free. Daniel, thanks so much for being with us.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
All right, guys, make it a very profitable day. Now is the time to go take some action. The one thing that you listened to today, one thing you thought about, take an action in that direction and start moving forward today in your income hacking. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time. If you got value out of our discussion today, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. Also, please share with a friend. Nothing is more valuable than creating financial friends who are like-minded. You can do that by inviting them to listen to the Income Hacker podcast. Bye for now, and make it a very profitable day.
Income Hacker may receive payment on the show from sponsors and guests in the form of books, giveaway items, discounts, or other remunerations. This show is for entertainment purposes only, and before making any financial moves, consult with a professional who can intimately understand your personal situation.